Station. Jarvis will be back with us in a second, and then we'll get started.
Okay. Okay, I'm about to share it. Friends. Okay, so we are live right now. Just there.
Hello, Facebook.
All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you all for joining us today. If you are an attendee, just let us know that you're here by just saying hello. Who's in the chat? Just let us know that you are able to see and hear us. You can just say, hey, hello. All right. Just want to get started with today. Thank you all for being on the discussion today. We have a limited amount of time to talk about an important topic that affects not only the education of our kids, but the future of this country and this world. I want to remind you all that this is a conversation that will be recorded and uploaded on the website for our SOBLI, as well as our Facebook page, and on our Trusted Voices YouTube channel. We want this to be shareable, and we want this to be used as an educational tool. We don't want you to be stingy with this information that we have today. We'll also want this to be a guide to help us to be more equity-minded going into the school year. My name is Dr. Jarvis Watson, and I'm a part of SOBLI, State of Black Long Island, and I also serve as the Assistant Dean of Students at Stony Brook University. This conversation today was inspired by the families and students that are facing challenges navigating the new normal of the reopening of schools. This is also inspired by the Education Action Team with SOBLI, and I want to take this opportunity to give them a shout out to Erica and Donna, as well as to the director, Alita White Barnes, who is with us tonight, and to the president and CEO, Teresa Sanders, who will be joining us a little bit later. Cannot forget my colleague and partner who is en route at this time, Retha Fernandez, who is also serving as your Suffolk County's Chief Diversity Officer. At this point, I want to also help you all realize it's not just SOBLI and some great educators that are on call today. We also are collaborating with Stony Brook University. We are also looking to do more things with Stony Brook down the road. But right now, we're in collaboration with the School of Professional Development, and more specifically with the Center for Teaching and Learning in Community. With this director who's on with us right now, and our colleague, Nicole Galante. Nicole?
Hey, Jarvis. Thank you so much for having me here. And thank you all for coming to this really important discussion. I'm here on behalf of the center to just kind of talk really specifically to our education community about the ways that we're facing different challenges, not just due to COVID, but certainly the challenges that we face anyway that are heightened by COVID. So tonight we'll be talking about some issues surrounding digital divides, access for students to technology for remote learning, what has worked, what hasn't, what suggestions we have, gaps in learning, etc. So the Center for Teaching and Learning in Community at Stony Brook is a new venture for us, and it is part of the School of Professional Development. I am the director of the center. I'm also the director of educational partnerships and innovation. So for all of you educators out there, we have a really robust set of programs at the center, workshops, trainings, and ongoing conversations, even with some of the panelists that you see tonight. So if you are interested in finding any information about the center, you can find us on the Stony Brook website, and you just search for CTLC. So I thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be part of this discussion and to bring some perspective.
All right, thank you, Nicole. And since we're on the topic of SBU, Stony Brook University, and our collaboration, I also serve as an adjunct professor with the Education Leadership Program with the SPD. And I want to give a shout out to my students who are live right now, joining us to have a conversation. These are master level students who are actually educational leaders or future educational leaders. And I can tell you that they are definitely critically looking at this conversation, as well as how it affects their leadership. And I'm just really happy to have them on. So I see a couple of them have said hello. So I'm saying hello back to you all. And it's great to have you on. So let's get started. In collaboration with SOBLI and the Center, we identified key educators in both Suffolk and Nassau counties to help facilitate the discussion today. The reopening of schools, equity and access. Rita, Nicole, and I will be moderating and framing our discussion this evening with these specific topics: safety and health concerns, social and emotional learning, the digital divide and gaps in academic achievement, culturally relevant teaching, and specifically talking about movements, hashtags, and white privilege, meeting the needs of diverse learners, and culturally relevant leadership. We have a great amount of educators, people also call friends, people I'm just meeting for the first time, and I know you're really gonna have a great conversation. They shared their bios, but I'm gonna go to all their bios, but their bios will be in the YouTube channel as well as on the website. But I will read the names and positions, and we will begin our conversation today. First off, good friend of mine, longtime friend, colleague, brother, James Crawford, who is the president of the Board of Education in Wyandanch, and is also assistant principal at Central Islip. James, thank you for being here today. Another James, James Richardson, elementary school educator in the Riverhead Central School District, who's also a musical composer, and he's a podcaster. So he'll share some information about, where to follow him as well. Daphne Irizarry, director and president of the Long Island Latino Teachers Association, otherwise known as LILTA. Been knowing Daphne for a long time, and a lot of the work she's done has really helped open up the doors for a lot of Latinx and African American students as well. So thank you, Daphne, for being on today. Brandy Scott, the president of Long Island Black Educators Association, and Brandy is another stalwart in this community. Brandy, it's so great to have you on here today. Dr. Tracy Adams, way back at Stony Brook University, but now she is assistant principal at Longwood Elementary Schools. She's a community advocate, alumni member of Sigma Gamma Rho Sorority Incorporated, the Beta Psi Sigma chapter, school building liaison for My Brother's Keeper, and also a mentor for the Rosebud Club, which really works with girls between the ages of 8 and 11. Dr. Tracy Adams, thank you for being here. My big brother, Wayne White, social studies teacher at Bellport High School, but is also the board director for NICET, president of the Bellport Teachers Association. And he just shared with me recently that he was appointed to the New York State Education Department Culturally Responsive Sustaining Strategy Team. That is a new thing they're doing, and I'm glad that you're on it because we need some really cultural minded brothers on there. So thank you, Wayne, for being here today. Another big sister of mine, Lorraine Richardson, is at the South Country Central School District. She's an ELA educator and adjunct professor with the Department of Linguistics at a wonderful alma mater, Stony Brook University. Lori, thank you for being here today. Glenn Stewart, Assistant Director of Special Education at Freeport, also working with People Personnel Services at Freeport Public School, Vice President of the Long Island Black Educators Association, and he was also a bilingual Spanish school psychologist. So thank you, Glenn, for being here. And last but not least, John Harrison, an education consultant. He is the Chief Executive Officer of Community Meditation Services, otherwise known as CMS, since 2017. He's also the co-chair of the State of Black Long Island Justice Initiative. So I just want to say thank you all for being on this call. It feels more like family than it is looking at as educators, but this is a good combination. So I want to start with the first question that really talks about safety and health concerns. So as we prepare to enter into our schools, parents and many families are concerned about the risk of having their children being in an environment that may put them at risk for contracting COVID-19. I would say the same concern is shared for not just the students, but also for the educators that are coming through. So this message is questions for Daphne, Brandy, James Richardson, and James Crawford. What precautions are schools taking to make their buildings as safe as possible? And the second part of that question is, what are some areas that still need to be considered as we're moving into this new normal?
Well, I think I can start by saying that in a lot of districts, what they have done is to ask building principals to find alternate spacing in order to increase the number of the amount of space for social distancing. They're also looking at alternatives within the building for classrooms, such as subdividing the gyms, such as losing auditoriums. They're taking in mind the OSHA guidelines. All right, and they're asking districts to be very careful in making sure that they order cubicles, plexiglass, area separators, etc., that meet OSHA standards. They also looked at the ventilation and air conditioning systems at various buildings. And you will note in some districts, they're actually taking out air conditioners because they find that they're not creating a positive, safe airflow within the building. And lastly, they're asking people to identify what you would call isolation rooms. So if there is a person or a staff member or a child who does have symptoms of the virus, they can go to the isolation room and be held there until they're picked up. So those are some of the precautions.
Thank you, Brandy. That's a lot similar to what we do at Stony Brook Universities in the plexiglass and isolation rooms. Daphne, would you want to share a little bit what you see in your district? Okay, move on. James Richardson.
Yeah.
Daphne was muted.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
Okay. Sorry. Go ahead.
Okay.
Right,
I was muted. Just from having conversations across Long Island, it seems a lot of school districts have formed committees to develop protocols to ensure the safety and health, such as the riding of the school buses protocols, the temperature check protocols, contact tracing protocols, in-school quarantine protocols. These are some of the things that they are doing to address the safety, and some are considering, having videos, developing videos on how to, board and exit the bus, how to enter the school, how to keep socially distanced at school, and how to enter the classroom. So that's some of them.
Now, James Richardson.
Yes. For me, as an educator, I've been teaching fourth grade for 20 years. And the first thing I thought about was schools, like how is this going to work? Because since this all started, CDC, social distancing and masks is the best thing we can do. And every educator here knows that is the hardest thing to pull off where we work. Because our room, my building is very old, so the rooms are small. I had 29 kids a few years ago, 6 feet's not gonna work. So I'm always following the news and figuring out. And I get, a lot of the stuff you hear people saying, oh, teachers they don't want to go back to work, this, that, and the other. It's hard for what we're doing to make this work. So my question was the social distancing. And I know a couple schools so far have bringing kids in Monday, Tuesday, one group, Wednesday, all day cleaning, Thursday, Friday, another group, because you can't have 30 kids in a room, but maybe you can have 15 and 15. That's something I know a lot of districts are looking into to socially distance that way. And the kids are doing digital work on the days they are not in the classroom. So that's, I know my district supposedly is going to be going that route. The other thing with the masks, again, I teach young kids and teenagers. There are adults who can barely keep a mask on. So in my mind, I'm thinking about how are we going to get younger kids, whatever age they decide to do this, how they're going to keep their mask on. And I took my daughter to the dentist. She was in the mask, she's 9 years old, 15 minutes. She was in it on the way into the dentist. That's it. So my advice to anybody here who is a parent and have their kids going back to school, at least for the younger grades, have them start wearing the mask before the first day of school. You can't say they've worn it. Most kids haven't left the house. So you can't say they now are going to wear it. They've worn it like 5 or 6 minutes. And on the first day of school, here's your mask. You need to wear it for 7 hours. Don't take it off. Go. Because it's not going to work. So maybe as for the parents who are listening, have them wear it around the house a little bit here and there, so they're a little bit familiar with it and learn not to trade it because someone else has a mask with SpongeBob on it.
Yeah, that's gonna be interesting. There's a lot of memes that talk about the situation that's going to happen in the classroom with she took my mask, or
yes,
they're wearing the mask on the back of their head and things like that. So it's going to be really interesting. So
it'd be helpful if parents can talk to them about it a little bit ahead of time before teachers do. Sorry to interrupt.
That's right. Now, Crawford, would you like to add a little bit?
Yeah, it's very interesting from my perspective because I'm dealing with it from two different avenues as a board member, dealing with the policy part, the budget part, and also as an administrator in terms of how do we implement these different changes. So in a lot of discussion of human nature versus reality, to where now human nature is us to be close, to hug, to touch, to talk to one another face to face. Now we know in studies that socialization is good for students, it helps students progress in all different levels. But now we're telling kids you got to be 6 feet apart, and by human nature we see as the adults it's hard for us to say 6 feet apart. So now how are we going to mandate students to stay 6 feet apart? Also keep on. Also, we got to monitor what kids touch, when they touch it, when adults touch it. It then also brings in the monetary aspect of how do we finance this particular venue? And we're in a tough situation of now, what do we cut back on? Because every budget is X amount of dollars. Now we got to bring particular dollars to this particular issue, which is necessary. And then how do we fund it? So as from the board standpoint, we're in a tough situation. At school standpoint, we're also in a tough situation. How do we implement it and mandate it to where we know if you get a group of people, no matter what age range it is, at some point in time, they're going to gather closer than 6 feet. So these are some of the things that we're trying to figure out and implement to have a safe and productive school year.
I think that's why school districts must partner with the Department of Health and set up some sort of system of regular testing and tracking within their school districts. I think they really have to set that situation up now as a school district so that once they do decide to go back, maybe a hybrid model, that they can encourage people to be tested on a regular basis and then to have the tracking system in place to, again, guarantee some sort of safety.
So one of the things that we are looking at the center, at the end of June, we had a 3-week symposium for superintendents and board members and other stakeholders about reopening plans. And some of you I know who are participants in this meeting went through those meetings with us as well. And one of the things that we're happy to say came out of that was the idea of a certification for a COVID safety manager for a school building. So we're putting together a training piece that would address that need in the school, because we know, as educators, and certainly James Crawford, you could feel this from two different sides as well, from a union perspective. And, is the school nurse going to be the person who's checking temperatures and isolating? Who's going to be in charge of the extra cleaning? And I know that a lot of this is dependent on this big announcement we're waiting for next week, right? Everybody's waiting for the governor and some further guidelines. But a lot of this too really can be addressed beforehand with some really careful planning and some anticipation of what might be. So in the same way that we might want to send the kids to, take a walk around the block with the mask on in order to practice some stamina there, I think that we need to consider those situations with some foresight as well. So having somebody in the building that's a safety manager for COVID specifically, as it turns out, there are a lot of different, the more I talk to people about it and the more I see people coming back to the corporate world, even the regulations about entering a building, about temperature checking, thermal scanning, there's so many moving parts and things to worry about. So we are definitely thinking about that too.
I mean, some of the school districts in their plans already have delineated or assigned someone as the COVID-19 contact person. And from the ones that I've seen and I heard, usually it's a school nurse. So that will be ideal to have even greater training in how to do that job well,
Well, it seems to be a problem in some districts, because in some districts they have nurses that are shared or traveling nurses. And now they're finding it very difficult to seek out more nurses Because let's face it, the salary of a school nurse is not certainly the salary of a nurse working in a private hospital or on private duty. So they're having a really, really hard time getting nurse professionals to come into the school districts.
Yeah, and I think that is actually a good segue in regards to what Crawford was kind of touching on, the aspect of is distancing, but also having someone you can relate to or connect with from a social emotional perspective. Having that school nurse or having that go-to person is really helps people get along throughout the day, because you never know what people are bringing in from what's happening at home into the school. And so on that aspect, and this is actually a good segue into the next question, as pertains to the challenges faced with social distancing and remote learning, what are the benefits of implementing social emotional learning program, initiative, or some type of thing into the curriculum? And this question goes to Lorraine, Daphne, Brandy, and Glenn. And then I have a follow-up question for you all after that.
Yeah, I want to share that during the normal times, many of our children are in need of this, they need it. And obviously research shows that our well-being impacts our capacity for learning. So in these crucial times, SEL, it's more important than ever. Our organization, the Long Island Latino Teachers Association, it's running a summer program with Wyandotte students. We have 20 students, and we make sure that during this virtual program, SEL is implemented every day. And how we do that is by the beginning of the day, begins with a check-in. They share how they're feeling. They share things that they're grateful for. And we end the day after the social activism component with yoga, breathing exercises, mindfulness, and others. And the feedback we get from the students, it's really very positive, and it shows the need for the daily implementation of this component in our program. So I would suspect it would be no different when we go back.
Well, let me say, Three Village did a survey among its parents recently, and they found out that 76% of the parents said that social and emotional involvement was paramount, that was one of their biggest concerns. And they felt that, but being at home with the child was losing contact with their peers, and was actually causing tensions between the parent and the child. And so they really wanted to see the child go back to some sort of contact schooling, and a lot of them prefer the hybrid model, just so the child can have, during a school day, some contact with a teacher or a social worker or another peer just to speak with. So I think that's something teachers and also just have to understand. The hybrid model must include some activities that support a child's social and emotional back feelings, not just math and science, but something else.
Never math if I had my vote, Brandy.
Well, see, I'm a math person, look out.
No math.
Respect to the English, respect to social sciences and humanities. Lori, now you want to chime in?
Yes, so we know how important our relationships are with our students. I think for myself as an educator going into my 23rd year, teaching ESL students who already come with a boatload of traumas that they have to deal with. So the sensitivity level is going to have to go up for all of our educators. It is not going to be a choice. Our students, I thought about the little ones who always want to come up and give you a hug.
Yes.
But we have middle school students who need hugs, and we have high school students who are going to need hugs. There's a woman named Rita Pearson. She said, no education can take place without creating relationships. And I know, as an educator for 23 years, that the relationships that I have built with my students over the years has been paramount for them and for me. It's for me as well. So our students are going to need a lot of support. I am concerned that, first of all, not all of us are relationship builders. It doesn't happen by virtue of just being a teacher. Some teachers are really, there for the education process, but they're going to have to be trained, and they're going to need to learn that sensitivity. If they don't already have it in their toolbox, they're going to have to learn that sensitivity. So that training is going to be necessary, but it's also going to put, I think, a little bit more pressure on our state to roll back on these testings. Sure. Because the testing kills the time that we have in our classrooms to build the relationships, to do things with the students outside of the classroom that they so desperately need. We can't take them on trips like we want to. We can't go on excursions. We can't do a lot of things because of the testing. And at this point, I think that New York State education, they're going to have to look at their testing, the rigorous nature of our testing schedule. I'm not saying we shouldn't have tests. I'm just saying that we need to prioritize our students' their emotional sense before we are concerned so much about what their state tests look like.
Mm-hmm. Also, in terms of the pandemic, people have been having problems in terms of their children feeling isolated. There's been an uptake in terms of depression amongst children, and what I've been doing in my district is having the social workers and psychologists reach out to the students because they're really being isolated at this point in time, and just to check on them. Even though it's summer, I still ask my staff to help out in terms of that. I've been doing it myself. Some children who are more severe have been hospitalized because of the isolation and loneliness and depression. And so when they go back to school, we already have a social emotional learning plan in place that they could the school district will utilize. We have mindfulness involved with that. They have breathing exercises, positive behavior, things of that nature. So right now, there's a lot of isolation, a lot of loneliness, a lot of depression. So going back to school, it's paramount that everybody get on board and join in force to try to get these kids, socially equipped to handle, this new norm.
Yeah.
Truly.
And I think one of the challenges is, at least what I'm seeing this summer in this, program, is that when students are sharing their emotions, and sometimes, there are 20 students on the screen, so they are very intimidated sometimes to really open up fully about how they're feeling, because it is a 22 people conversation. So it's very hard, unlike in the classroom where you could take a student to the side and have a private conversation about what's going on. It's very challenging to do it in a remote learning setting. So we have 2 educators and we are managing that, but if we have to go back and we have a large number of students, how do we manage a student that is having a crisis while we have the rest of them looking, at what's going to happen, what's going on? I also think that school districts also have to think of their teachers and staff. We need to be given opportunities sometimes to heal and build our capacity to help our students. And sometimes I don't think that districts sometimes, because of the many pressures, are paying attention that we also need those opportunities to build that capacity.
I think this is a time now for school districts to look to other avenues for support. They need more social workers. They need more psychologists. Why not look to the universities and take in intern social workers to give support to small group counseling during the school day? It would be a good experience for the intern from the university. It would also be a learning experience for the intern, and the school district would have the services of a professional who's going to go into the field full time, and they may not have to have such a high cost of hiring someone for say a year or 2 years at a time. So the universities could support us in this avenue if we reached out to them now.
I would agree in terms of the university supporting our students. Every year we have interns in Freeport, and they work directly with the students under the, they're mentored by our psychologists and social workers. However, a lot of times you find that the kids relate better because the interns tend to be younger, so they are able to deal with some of the problems that that they might have happened on their own, when they were that age, because they're not so far removed in terms of age. So, like sometimes if the, more mature adults can't, handle a situation, sometimes the ones that are fresh out of grad school might have a better rapport with students. So we've been doing that on a regular basis, and it's been working.
Good, I'm glad to hear that. Excellent.
Can I just add a little something there, Jarvis? Another group that I think we need to pay attention to are the parents and families. I think Brandy mentioned earlier with the study from 3 Village about some of the tensions between students and their parents.
Yes.
I think that's another group that we need to make sure. I know the students are our #1 priority, but when they leave us or when they're not with us present in school, they're going to be home with their families. So whether it's teaming them up with some kind of outside resources or the social worker in our building during the quarantine and the lockdown, he actually offered group Zoom meetings for parents at the different grade levels, where basically it was just a place for them to unload a little bit and see that they weren't the only ones going through what they were going through. And he supported them by either providing resources or different activities that they could do with their child or their children, if they had multiple children, to kind of ease some of that tension in the home. So I think that's another group that we need to pay a little closer attention to, because that's the other side of us working with those kids, are the parents and the families.
I would definitely agree with that, because if we look at the studies, there's an uptake in terms of like neglect and abuse cases, even though they're being underreported because kids are not in school, but it's been going on in the homes because parents are frustrated. Like there might be multiple kids in the home and they don't want to, deal with a lot of the problems because they don't know how. This remote learning is not that easy to take hold of. And sometimes they don't have access in terms of like having a limited amount of computers or don't have internet access or, so we've been trying to deal with those challenges as well, by, providing Chromebooks and different iPads and different devices to help at least alleviate that problem, because that at the beginning of the pandemic, that was a problem.
Dr. Jarvis, can I just add that since this platform, and I think it's imperative that we speak to, if there's fellow board members on here, superintendents, administrators, and also the eligible voters, where we have to put pressure on our elected officials to also create aid, because this, in any disaster throughout our history, there always was aid to it. And this is a social emotional disaster for many of our students, because some of them, they're trapped in the house. If they was abused, they trapped 24/7 now with the people that was abusing them. Some of them not eating, so the school was their only recourse for lunch or breakfast. So they're coming in September. These are some of the things before they even walk in the door that we're going to have to face and deal with. Because if I'm hungry and I'm being abused, 1 + 1 is not on my mind. So these are some of the things that we have to put pressure on our elected officials to find relief for those social emotional needs of school districts, because we're going to need more social workers, more psychologists, more avenues for parents and students to get relief before we get back to state mandated tests.
Exactly.
I'm going to jump in here and just take it, Jarvis, if you don't mind. because all of you are saying things that lead us to our next topic, which I'm going to pose some questions about, which is the digital divide and the gaps in learning. So I'm listening really closely to what you all are saying, and it's making me think about a few things I wanted to share. So one, I've been seeing some really encouraging posts from teachers online about things that they're doing to set up their classroom to do the socialization while social distancing, if you can imagine. So we've seen that video go viral of the teacher who has a different handshake for every kid who comes in, and and it's so heartwarming. And now that stuff like that is just gone. So I saw a classroom with a chart out front, socially distant ways to greet each other, air high five, make a heart like this. Really great stuff. So we're resilient, and children are resilient. That's not to say that we shouldn't pay attention to those social and emotional learning things, because there's been a lot of talk also, and I've written a little bit about Maslow's hierarchy of needs during this time. So the pyramid of needs, our children and we need to be meeting those basic physical needs for safety, for shelter, things like that. And a lot of our children do not have those needs met before the pandemic, much less now. So before we can, I think James said it, before we can have them worry about 1+1, they're not going to be able to do that if they're hungry, if they're being abused, if they're, just needing a hug. And I do definitely think that there are possibilities for the university to support school districts. I can tell you through the center and through our teacher prep programs at Stony Brook, we are doing a lot of work with our student teachers. As per New York State guidance, I was very happy to see that school districts should utilize student teachers as much as possible. But even just to say, maybe there's something in between, the support of a social worker and just a friendly face to be there in person on Zoom. There are ways to connect and to get out of that isolation and that feeling digitally. I also don't want to discount that. So there are many different things that we can do to make sure that if we're designing remote instruction, we're not transferring what school was onto a screen, because it's never going to work. I should be seeing like this, like crazy right now. We already learned it, right? It's never going to work if we have school, but screen school. Kids a video is going viral right now of a girl who, films her quarantine loop over and over, that she's just in front of the computer and missing out on all of her connections and friends. And I have the chills thinking about it. And it's gut wrenching. I have a 5-year-old son who had a COVID test yesterday because he went to his in-person camp that he puts his mask on for, arrives at his arrival minute, so as not to arrive with other children, temperature, change your shoes, sanitize, wash your hands, sit in your own little hula hoop kingdom, which is brilliant to let them social distance. Are you a prince? She says, and takes their temperature. But he had a slight temperature yesterday. And we're not sure. He didn't have it at home. We're not sure if it was because they took it in the sun. We're not sure what, but okay, rather than put him in isolation, we'll take. So I had to watch my son get this terrible, physically grueling COVID test, and then thought, oh no, the one thing he's been willing to go through all this to go to camp for 2 hours a day, every other day, he's going to miss the very last day if we don't get those test results today. So I empathize. There's a good ending to the story. He's negative for COVID. We heard today. I picked up the note. He can go to camp tomorrow for his last day. So all is well on my end. Yes, thank you. But for so many, that changed in an instant for him. So when I think about the anxiety of children going back to school in that environment, that was a very controlled environment for my son, with 8 children in a full building. They're super spread out. Everything is safe, temperature, coming straight off of total isolation where no kids are bringing germs in. It's not the winter. I can't imagine the, what our students are going to have to muster up to deal with, to be able to walk into a school building if by the time hours pass, everybody's got their temperature taken and they can get in the school building. So I really am a strong advocate for changing what we do with school. I think Lorraine was talking about testing and what that takes away from the experience of bonding and connecting. And we do need to test, and we do need to make sure that we're testing, I'll do air quotes, first, the safety, you know, back to that pyramid. We're not going to be able to get information. We know we lost learning. We already know that. We know we lost learning. And what we need to start knowing is that that's okay. And we need to start recognizing what we've gained or the opportunities to learn in different ways. So one of the things I know that we're all, you know, at least planning to do is some form of remote instruction, right? So whether it's every day, I know a few, I see one of my principals on here now I work with contemplating, you know, should we do this all in person, at least in the beginning? Should we do hybrid? But no matter what happens, there's always going to be that digital divide is going to be felt a little bit harder during this time. So I want to just raise the question instead of just letting fireworks go off behind me because I'm on a soapbox. I want to pose the question to you, some of our panelists here. What can we do to address what's going on? And what's been your experience with having teachers teach from home and letting students see pictures hanging on the walls and having a glimpse into your life? And even just from a union standpoint, maybe, I know that even in a classroom, in an empty classroom, you know, teachers have been given the chance to go in and film themselves teaching over the summer. And no, I don't want to be on film. I don't want my image, you know, passed around there. And I understand. So I'm going to start, I think, because he's been a little quiet, with Wayne. Wayne, have you had any experience with that? Or what are your thoughts, you know, about the idea that we're going into kids' homes, literally, with Zoom meetings, and that they're coming into our lives?
Well, for the first part, when you talked about going into homes and just talking about from the teacher perspective, a lot of teachers were not prepared to do this. So they did not have, some of them did not have the space to do it. Or if they have little ones and the little ones are running around, how can they do it? So live teaching for the teachers themselves was very difficult to maneuver within their own life, because it was upended in mid-March and all of a sudden this was the new norm. With that being said, with the students, the same thing with them. Their lives were upended, and what we saw was that we saw lack of access to technology in a lot of homes. So what was happening now is that the haves were able to pretty much follow through and do what they could because they had the resources, but the have-nots kept on falling behind, and we were trying to give the have-nots options such as if they could come to school and get paperwork, but it's not the same, obviously. I know in my classes, I had limited students coming into sessions that I had, and I opened them up for everyone when I had a chance, because I too have little ones at home. And like I said, the digital divide was definitely in effect in terms of teaching and in terms from their home life. Also with their home life, some of the problems, and I think a lot of you mentioned it before with the social and emotional learning. One of the things as teachers in the classroom, we could see if a child is having issues and we could pull them to the side and say, Johnny or Jane, what's going on? Now at home, what you have is, and I think Glenn talked about it, uptick in abuse at home. And one of the issues is that I think domestic abuse in the homes are down, which is scary, because what happens is people don't report with the abuser in the home. And we can't see that if we're on a computer, we can't see what's going on in that household. So that's another element of the digital divide that we have to address. And it's gonna also affect, obviously, our poorer students. And a lot of us teach in districts that have a significant amount of free and reduced lunch recipients, which they definitely do not have the resources. and it's going to continue that education gap that we've been talking about for so long. And on Long Island, to be specific, we're funded primarily by property tax. So with that funding, you see that the people that have more resources than the people that don't. And that is going to not even the playing field. Even though the state tries to give aid, higher aid to those districts, it still does not even the playing field. And like I said, on Long Island, if pay attention to the news, I believe the current leadership said that they were going to divest out of low-income housing. So now, with that being said, it's basically discussing how to eliminate the poor out of the suburbs, which is really a dog whistle for racial segregation again. So all of these things are happening within the digital divide. And like I said, we're going to need, and a lot of you said it already, we are going to need more resources from the feds and the state in order to help our students who do not have.
Absolutely. If I could jump in here, I agree with everything that's been said. And while we are all aware that the digital divide exists, I think in some circumstances, it's even more stark than we realize. Just Friday, I was having a conversation with the principal, and she informed me that only 3% of her students had access to a computer or tablet. And so a lot of times it gets down to how are we defining access to technology? Because now if we're reducing it to, well, you had access to a free flip phone or some other older portable device, where we've all experienced trying to send a longer email or a text on a telephone. Imagine trying to read a book or write a paper. It's virtually impossible to do a great job at that. And as I think as Wayne was closing up, it was about, well, how do we bring additional resources to those most in need? One of the things we really have to do as a collective is make sure that our most vulnerable communities, those districts that have been traditionally underfunded, traditionally have that lower tax base, get access to the monies that have just been made available. So yesterday, the United States Department of Education granted New York State Department of Education $20 million. Now, one of our charges need to be, we need to make sure that money goes to the right places and that it actually gets down to those that are the neediest, and how can we support both trying to close the gap on that digital divide, but also, as was mentioned earlier, how do we begin to bring additional resources so that we can educate the whole child, and addressing those things using creative modes, using virtual groups, and making sure that all those various connections can be brought to the table for the betterment of all of our students. Because it's happening in some places, but there are a lot of places where it is not happening. And that's where, as a collective, we have to be able to raise our voices to make sure that that is occurring.
I think when you say raise our voices, I think on that theme, we need to reach out to corporate America. There are districts that students need laptops, they need tablets. Corporate America has the funds to fund programs such as that for school districts. So why is not corporate America stepping forward? We need to put them on the line. Students need help. Corporations need to spend some of that money on our students.
I agree.
Let's send Brandy in there.
I'll get the money one way or another.
Jarvis, it's Teresa. Hey, I have to chime in on that one because,
really,
you know, Brandy, what you and John just said, you know, it's the coordination, and you know, sometimes we're approaching these entities individually, or it's one district that goes into, you know, Microsoft or Amazon, and we have to build a collective, coordinated movement. You know, the challenge with Long Island is that we've got all these school districts working independently.
124, that's right.
There's no coordinated voice for everybody. So if you've got people in your community that are well connected and vacation last year with the president of Amazon. You know, they're going to call in that connection. They're going to make sure their kid's school district gets whatever it is they need. But that is not moving towards equity. If we really want to move the dial, and this is the time, because people are paying attention to Black lives. I mean, we may not think they're paying attention, but I tell you, especially in the corporate world, they are now paying attention because they realize it will impact their bottom line if they do not pay attention. It is up to us, though, to come as a coordinated body, because it can't just be Brentwood School District asked, and then, you know, next week Wyandanch asked. No, it needs to be a coordinated Long Island regional request that says we need this for all districts. And then the districts that don't need it, they can opt out because a lot of them don't need it.
They don't.
There's a minimum standard of items that our school districts and our children absolutely have to have in order to move forward post-pandemic, because this just exposed what we always knew was the dirty little secret. We knew that our kids were not performing because they didn't have access to technology before the pandemic. I mean, what learning environment, you know, does not include technology?
Amen.
Yeah. I think Teresa, the message to say that having a technology device is essential. It's an essential tool. And we cannot say we are having century 21st education when it's not century 21st.
Exactly. Yes.
And for the population I serve as an educator and I represent, it's not just the digital divide, with that comes also the language divide.
Yes.
Yes. A lot of them had, a phone, that was their, device. But when they tried to communicate and learn from their districts about what platform to use and how to engage in learning, the information was only in English.
Right.
I mean,
That's correct.
today I had to call a school district in Nassau County and say, why is your family resource guide only in English?
Right.
When you have X amount of English language learners. So for that population, it is the digital divide. The lack of Wi-Fi, it is the language divide. And when even Brandy and I, Libia and Liz, partnered, and we gave a lot of devices to students. What was the next obstacle? They didn't know how to access that. They don't have some of the computer literacy skills to engage. They have the device, they have the Wi-Fi, but the parents don't know how to assist.
I wanted to jump in right there because that was exactly what I wanted to discuss. On top of the language barrier issue is the fact that, yes, educators were asked to teach online overnight. And a lot of educators were not prepared to do so. Our students were not prepared. More so, we have not trained students to learn in a distance learning environment.
We haven't trained teachers to teach.
That wasn't part of what they had ever experienced, not on a long-term basis. It's worlds apart from setting your child in front of the computer to practice some things online than it is to have everyday interaction and instruction and expecting them to learn in a vacuum. Because that's really what they were doing. They were learning in a vacuum. Their peer learning just disappeared. They didn't have their friends to turn and talk to. And the fact that we were asked to, as educators, do something that we had not ever done before. Boarding schools, different practice schools, they have resources that we just don't have. And they also had the time to prepare their students to learn from a textbook online. Our students don't necessarily know how to navigate a textbook online. That is a completely different animal for them. So in our going back to hybrid learning, once again, we're going to have to take time away from, content in not air quotes, to make sure that our students are prepared to learn in a distance learning environment and to respect that environment.
Yes.
Because
That's
as
a
an
great
educator,
point, Lorraine,
my-
because there are a lot of things that we need to attend to on the basic level, right? Like, how do you do a Zoom meeting? How do you, etiquette for having an in-person conversation with a mask on, and those kinds of things should be taught as sure as we teach procedures and responsibilities.
But even before, Nicole, I hate to cut you off, but even before we get to that, our students have to be taught how to respect technology. So much of it has been for play for them.
That's right.
So much of it has been for social media for them, that I know as myself, as an educator, I was very hesitant to put my likeness in front of them because of the things that they do and the things that they use. I'm not talking about everybody, child, so don't put in the chat room, not my baby. Look, if it's not your baby, then I'm happy for you. But there's some babies out there that will, put inanimate objects in, they will screenshot, and they will do things that are inappropriate. So we have to teach our students, they have to have an intelligence now about how to approach the online platform, how to make it a respectful place, but also have fun. They have to be able to learn both of that. There's some adults that don't know how to do that.
That's for sure.
We have a huge mountain to climb when it comes to making sure that they understand that it can be used for good and for evil, and how to responsibly use this platform to get their education that they so desperately need, but also in order to connect with their teachers in a respectful manner.
Yes. That definitely segues to our next topic, which also I'm going to talk to you about, which is this idea of movements, culturally relevant teaching. I like to say hashtag teaching. How do we kind of deal with what is culturally relevant now? So Lorraine, you're talking about using this technology for good, and we have to respect it because, this is what they used to play on. I do think, and also you were talking about teachers not wanting to have their likeness out there, and I get it. I don't want to be a meme anywhere either. But I do think that speaks to everything that we know to be true about all of this and at the heart of teaching. Because anything that is, making a photocopy or programming something, that's all paperwork stuff. What's at the heart of teaching are two things: empathy and vulnerability. And if we can be empathetic in a way that leaves us a little bit vulnerable, so that we could give students the opportunity to understand how to be empathetic themselves, then we can start to approach all of these topics and then some. So that's why I'm saying it totally leads me to think about these movements and hashtags and whatever. Black lives do matter a lot more right now in the public eye than historically ever before. And I know that that's coming out of my mouth. And I know I've had conversations where I've said, well, what are we going to do when we go back to school? I mean, obviously, we're going to talk about Black Lives Matter and, all these different movements that are happening. And people go, why would we do that? It's the pandemic and I said, well, because why wouldn't we do that? These kids are not only traumatized by a pandemic, by all of this isolation and the lack of socialization and these digital divides that exist very sharply. Not only that, but they're culturally isolated as well. And a lot of children are going to school, and from whatever, if it's hybrid, in person all the time, remote, not, they are bound to be in front of, whether in person or on a screen, a teacher that does not look like them. So if I am going back to school with my class, I am bound to be in front of Black and brown children looking for a role model, and they're not looking to me. And what do we do? And what do I do with that privilege that I carry into a classroom? So I really wanted to make sure that we touched on things like that, because the only thing that I can do is bring my lived experience to any conversation, and the way that I've experienced these things, and the way that I've observed, and the way that, my background brings to bear on whatever it is we're dealing with. But I think we would be doing a huge disservice to our children, and to even talk about social and emotional learning first without talking about the ways that these movements have been affecting our kids. they're adept at using technology, social media. I don't care if they're on a flip phone, they'll figure out. I don't care if they're on a Texas Instruments 592 calculator, they're gonna figure out how to use this technology and use it the way that they wanna use it. And it's a great time for us to harness that urge to use that technology and to be authentic and for them to find their voices. So I think it's a really great opportunity. Hear me out. I know it's, a terrible context, but it's a great opportunity to say, here's what we can do. And here is me giving you a voice. And here's how I'm respecting technology. Guess what, guys? I am old. I don't know how to do what you do on TikTok. I don't know why you do what you do on TikTok. I can do this dance for you, but you tell me why that's relevant to your life. In the same way that I would say that, I'm urging everyone who's watching and involved here tonight, even on Facebook or wherever we are, YouTube combination, do that about race. Have the tough conversations about race. I can come to my students and say, I do not look like you. I do not have your experiences, and you don't look like me or have my experiences. And let's talk about it the same way that we would talk about how a kid would use Snapchat versus how I would use, a Google Drive or something. That's
Nicole, what you're saying, I think all of us are aware of, and the big but is this: I think the first thing we need to recognize that only 8% of the teachers here on Long Island are teachers of color. That's the first thing you have to do, is to hire, mentor, and support the teachers that we already have in the system so that they can do a proper job in the classroom. There are so many people of color who are teachers who are having very difficult times in their various districts because of low resources or because of an environment that is not necessarily supportive of a teacher of color. All right, so you keep that in perspective. What else can I say? I think that besides getting more teachers of color, we also need to have students have more input in what they want to learn. Often we give them only what we want them to learn and not, we don't listen to what they would like to learn, information they would like to learn about their culture, their history, their past.
Yep.
And I think that is important what Brandy is saying in the context that 8% of the teachers are minorities, while 45% of our students are minorities. So the disproportion is huge. The gap is huge. And I want to share with you something. In our summer camp, the themes that we are addressing are social activism, and we were discussing Black Lives Matter. One of the young boys, he drew a self-portrait of himself. Half of the face was completely black. The other half was pictures of things that he likes to do and his interests. And when he had to present his self-portrait, he told us, half of me is black because that's the only thing people see, a black face. They don't know about my potential. And I think we have to engage students about conversations like these. We also talk about—
I can definitely see, and we can do that through engaging them in discussions of literature. The Brief and Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde is about that. And we carry so many of these things that kind of define us at first glance. Any one of us, I can say the same for different reasons. But I do want to ask Tracy, because I know that you have some things to say about this topic. So I want to hear what you're thinking about it.
I think that a huge piece of this is not just necessarily how do we teach culturally relevant curriculum, but having our faculty and staff be comfortable having these conversations. There are people who I might work with who are very uncomfortable speaking about race or cultural background or their ethnicity or the ethnicity of their students, or maybe making a mistake and just seeing, like Daphne said, about just seeing the color and not going deeper and understanding their students and other faculty members. They have to be comfortable in themselves, in their own skin, and then having conversations with other adults first before they can go in front of our kids and start having these conversations. If they can't even have a conversation with their colleagues comfortably about that, then that's something I think the schools need to help facilitate. We had a lot of conversations with our faculty this summer after a lot of the things that had gone down in our society today. And there were people who were comfortable, and they were okay to say they were uncomfortable and talk about what can we do as faculty, parents, as adults, and having these conversations amongst ourselves, similar to like what we're having today, before we can even start addressing how do we have these conversations with our students.
Yes, I agree with that. And one thing that we definitely have to do is we actually need to embed anti-racism curriculum, especially at the elementary levels. We need to start with the younger kids to make sure that they see different people and see different, pretty much just to fight racism from the bottom up with this group. So after May 25th, and that was a very hurtful day for many of us, life changed not only for our students, but for a lot of us here when we saw that video. And after that, just to give you a personal story, actually it wasn't even one of my former students, it was one of my students in my school who graduated, reached out to me and said, listen, we want to do a march. And pretty much she came to me because I was one of the only Black faces that she knew that would help her out. And this was a white student as well who did this. So when I told her what she shouldn't do, what she didn't do in terms of policy and things like that, we had an excellent march in Bellport for Black Lives Matter. And because of that relationship that I didn't even directly have with the student, she knew to come to me to ask questions about what should be done to address these topics. One of the other things I wanted to talk about is, I think Tracy kind of mentioned something, teaching faculty about their implicit biases, because that is important because they don't even know they have them. And one of the things in terms of hiring, I know Brandy made a mention of, and Daphne made a mention of hiring more educators of color, is that districts really need to answer this question. What can they do to disrupt the racial status quo in their districts? I wish that districts should embed racial equity in all of their interview questions for everybody that is going into school. So anybody being hired, those questions should be asked, what can they do to ensure racial equity in the school? And right now, pretty much in interview questions, you don't see that question, or maybe you'll see the diversity question here and there, just one. But it needs to be embedded in as many questions as possible to make sure that the person who's sitting in that interview knows how important this is to the school district. Therefore, they could be prepared for an answer and know what to do, because planning is the first step, and then you go out and you perform. So this needs to be embedded when you're asking questions for potential teachers. You also need to focus on funding of programs from the bottom up, that we have more educators of color, such as Future Teachers of America in the high schools. And also what I was a part of, and many of us are a part of at Stony Brook, Teacher Opportunity Corps. So that gave us the end to be successful educators in districts. And all of these things need to be done from grade school, from elementary school up, to make sure we have more and more people of color in the pipeline to become educators in school districts, especially here on Long Island.
All right, hold on. Let me jump in real quick, because I was looking at the time. We have until 7:30. I just want to let you all know that we need to be cognizant of time. I hate even stopping this conversation right now. I just want to let y'all know that even if you do go past that time, you want to keep talking, we're recording everything, so it'll be recorded. So for those who are listening, thank you for staying on. For those on Facebook Live, thank you for being with us. Let's keep the conversation going. Whoever is going next, I just want to make sure.
Let's talk about the professional education, the professional development of our current teachers. So we're talking about interviewing incoming professionals, but our professionals that are in the classroom, and I'm just going to say it because I got 23 years in, so y'all work that out. We have educators who are not going to support all of their students. They don't see students as equal. They are bigoted, they are biased, they are not, it's not even just implicit, they are very clear about how they feel and what they're doing in the classroom. So it's incumbent upon our superintendents, our boards of education to do the work in making sure that our current teachers that still have 10, 20, 25 years to go, that they understand that all of their students need to have equitable education that will provide them to be positive parts of our society, whether they go to college or whether they go for vacations, whether they open their own businesses. They have to be given the privilege of having the same equitable education, and that they all will receive that education without the idea behind it that one student is going to make the grade and another one isn't, just by them walking through the door. We're going to have difficult, uncomfortable, small group conversations that really delve into some people doing some really deep self-reflection, because you have people's children and you have their lives in your hands. And the words of an educator, even more so than a parent sometimes, can shape and define who that child is. Just like we say, if a parent says, oh, you're stupid, oh, you're ugly, oh, all this for years and years and years, what about those educators who are in the classroom that have less expectations for their students of color just on arrival, not for any other reason, and have been doing it for years and years and years, and allowed to do it for years and years and years for many varied reasons. But now is the time, I think, and this is the environment. We have the right atmosphere to have those conversations. I'm not sure how that's going to be done union-wise or contract-wise. That's not my business, hopefully. But I think that those conversations are going to be
like
important.
I think that it starts at the Board of Education, Lorraine. The Board of Education has to set the tone in its mission statement and its vision statement. It has to hold accountable the administrators and the principals to really educate the staff as far as diversity is concerned, and also to, if need be, take those aside who are not doing the right thing and, shall we say, persuade them to do the right thing in order to meet their guidelines of the district. One other thing came to mind, Nicole, you're involved in formulating programs for people to become teachers. Maybe we should start there for diversity training, for implicit bias.
Absolutely start there.
Start there, because you're sending to us candidates, and they're coming to us, many of them, without ever having a teacher of color, and they don't live in our communities. And
Not only are we going to start there with the pre-service teachers, but I am also able to put together programs with, again, people who are here tonight,
I'll teach it for you. I got it.
Teachers who are in service, who are working now. At the center, we have a bunch of professional development workshops that address this very thing in a really open way. I also wanted to mention that we're planning on making something for parents, a training, a resource, a something, because a lot of the times, even that level of social emotional learning and attention starts, especially now that we're all at home. So I think that we need some kind of parallel stuff. We're also looking to revive the Future Teachers program in a way through the center. So we'll be able to, I've talked to Jarvis about how to go about doing that. So some great things are on the horizon because of conversations like this, and because we're all willing to be vulnerable and have empathy. I know it's really late. I know we're running really, how are we doing, Jarvis?
We got about 6 minutes before we get to that last part before Teresa and Elita. Yeah.
All right, I think those 6 minutes are for you.
You know what? Now, I will say this, in regards to those 6 minutes, I think that you all have actually jumped into that part because you're actually kind of covering some of these bullet points I'm looking at. And what you're talking about is being culturally relevant as a leader.
That's correct.
And I'm trying to think who didn't speak just yet a little as much, but I'm looking at on my
Jarvis, can I ask why you thinking?
James, go ahead.
And dealing with the leadership, and one of the key pieces are, I think, two things as leadership that we have to, in order to change this paradigm, that it's two things that we have to empower our parents and our students, and we also have to have a discerning ear, because a lot of times when our students cry out, it's not necessarily articulate in terms of they need help. It may come off as being disrespectful. It may come off as being sounding, hate to use that term, but sounding crazy. Because if we look at even what's going on now with the movement against police violence, those cries came out in the 90s. If those paid attention, you had groups come out saying "F the police," but we since they was vulgar, we turned it off. We turned a blind ear and not really listen to the message. The message they were saying, if you listen to it, that we were being abused, we're being violated, we are hurting, we're being hurt. So even fast forward to today, we have to listen with a discerning ear when our students complain, when our parents complain. I've sat in plenty of meetings where parents were unable to articulate their pain, and certain administrators, certain board members turned them off or turned them away. And we cannot do that. We got to understand and be discerning and what is the actual message that's being said. And then also empower them to where we teach them their rights. We teach them how to articulate their pain. Because if especially dealing here where I live, it's generational abuse that's going on, from teachers to students, from administrators to parents, from within households and things of that sort. So it almost becomes a norm of this is how it's supposed to be, until we empower them that no, it's not supposed to be like that. Right. You're entitled to certain things. So when we start talking about leadership, these are some of the things that we have to incorporate within, not just with our school system, but within our community, empowering and also listening with a discerning ear.
I think we need to encourage more people of color to run for school boards, not just professionals, but also young people to run for school boards. I think that would also give a district a more holistic feeling of what's going on for their students.
Well, culturally aware people of color, because you have people of color who are not culturally aware, who still feed into the paradigm that's going on.
That is true, but you need some.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. You have whole communities that are minority communities. When you look at their school board, the school board does not reflect them at all. Right. So there's a disconnect there.
So let me let John jump in real quick, because I want to hear from like a social worker background kind of perspective for some of the things that James was talking about, not being like receptive with your ears, but also with your culture and with your heart. Can you kind of talk to like leaders about how to come from like a social welfare or counseling or like a listening, active listening perspective?
Right. So there are so many factors that come into play. I once did a study of a particular school district, and part of the study was to take a look at their disciplinary methods, but also what was the tone and tenor of the school, and how did that resonate with the students and with the parents upon visiting. And when we started out this process, not every staff member knew that we were coming in. And that was important, because that told me what were they communicating to others. Yeah. So in some schools, you were completely ignored. And then when we saw that, we had other people kind of come in and see whether or not there was a pattern that occurred. And many times that occurred along racial lines. But what we see, and particularly I think is important when we talk about the students themselves. So as a Black man who's gone through the ranks, spent essentially all of my career in the not-for-profit world, I've had, and this maybe is similar to Mr. White, young people in our building just come up and like sneakily put their head by my door. And I say, hey, come on in. And the question is, how'd you get here? Or how did you get out? And it's amazing, because it's not that we knew each other personally, but they saw somebody that they said, you know what, I think I can talk to them, I can connect with them, I can speak to my insecurities and speak to my fears. And for me, that has really enforced how I look at hiring practices, as well as sometimes we can take the smartest person and that person is the wrong fit. So having that awareness of your own biases, sometimes your own fears of particular communities, and become cognizant of, well, how does that impact how I view the person I'm supposed to be helping? And if it ends up being more harm, sometimes we have to coach those folks out and let them know this is not the right place for you if we can't coach them up. So that's always been something that's been close to my heart. And then there's also making sure, particularly as we talk about, I'm a social worker by training, social work and education, is making sure that we actually have more Black males particularly.
True.
Even though our Black population is lower, it's even a smaller population, not necessarily represented on this panel, but of Black men. And so I've always been cognizant of making sure that our searches have been extensive enough that we had a wide enough pool that we can really get the best talent, the best fit for whatever initiative it is that we're doing. And I think it's paramount that we are cognizant of how we can best reach our students, our families, our communities, and we have to be able to do it in lockstep. And if there's disconnects, we're not going to be as successful as we possibly can in terms of raising the bar for education in the broadest sense for all of those that are in our charge. And I just think for me and many of my colleagues, that becomes one of the key points, that we have to look at connectivity and the ability to connect to those as being a key driver of success.
I just want to just pop in with what John said, because I know when you said we need more Black male educators, there are studies, and I want to give a shout to Brother Richardson for doing what he's doing in the 4th grade. There is a study that says when students have people of the same race in their teaching their classroom from grades 3 through 5, the graduation rate increases by at least 20%, but upwards to 30% if it's a Black male. So that's what you said, John, actually is backed up by numerical data that says it's without taking away from anybody else. So we're not just increasing the graduation rate for people of color, but we're bringing everybody in, which is definitely something that I just wanted to add into what you said. So we do have data that works.
Right.
Which I think is I wish you had more time to kind of go into this, but I think we need a part 2.
Yep.
And,
and 3 and 4.
And I'm saying this for those who need to go at 7:30. I get it, but if you all need to kind of like do like the post conversation, please feel free, because this is like 24-hour kind of like recording. But I wanted to make sure we gave time for Alita and Teresa to really kind of wrap this thing up. And we're not done just yet, but I just want to make sure that I want to say thank you to all who are participating. For those who are listening, I hope you are paying attention, and hopefully this is something resonating with you as leaders. Take this back to your districts, and we actually have some messaging for you that we want to also for you to take back to your community. So Alita or Teresa, I'm not sure who's going first.
I'll jump in, and then I'm going to turn it over to Alita. I am so excited about this dialogue tonight, because we just got to bring it to scale. I mean, a lot of what we're talking about, we live, we know. It's just, how do we bring it to scale so that it has a seamless impact across Long Island? And the way that Long Island is structured, it'll make you work, and you feel like, so what did I do? Because we don't always see the impact of our labor within our lifetime. Or sometimes we're in the grocery store shopping, and then a kid comes up and goes, remember that day you told me, and I now have a house and I have children, and then it reinvigorates us to go back and do it again. It's that kid Wayne talked about, that calls where you didn't even have a relationship, but you realized you impacted someone simply by your presence. And that is the value of what we're doing. It is the value of how we are trying to inform the community. We just got to scale up because we need all of our districts on Long Island to pay attention. We need to make sure that we could bring the Coles programs, not just say, okay, this is something that's going to be adapted here. We need to scale it up so that all districts incorporate teacher immersion programs where we can make sure that, and it doesn't matter the teachers' races. I have seen some teachers that are more culturally aware that are not Black, but we have to make sure that we build the program in, because a lot of what you're saying, you are the boots on the ground, you interact with the students, you interact with the parents, and this is how we scale up, by having these conversations, figuring out how do we get this information to our policymakers, how do we enforce some of the policies that are there that, you know, certain districts just ignore. They act like they don't have to do it. So it's not, the burden is not all on us. It should not be, because there are people that's getting paid every day to do what we want them to do. Now we have to hold them accountable for doing it. And there's two things. We got to vote. This is such an important election, you all, that could change the course of our lives.
Sure.
We have got to vote. We've got to get everybody within our sector to vote. We have got to complete the census. I mean, these are critical tools that if we don't, all of this stuff we're talking about, there won't be resources allocated to our districts because they won't know how many people are in our district because we're not counting ourselves. So please, I encourage you, continue the conversation. Any ideas you have in terms of scaling up. I know a lot of you with your own organizations, you're going to Albany, you're talking to the legislatures, you're doing this. How do we bring more scale to that? So that if you're going to Albany, we should all send a rep, you know, to go to Albany. We have to develop our policies. I want to thank Jarvis, you know, for the work that he's doing with Trusted Voices, because this is, you know, taking this to scale. And Jarvis, you know, this was a concept, an idea, and you hit the ground running, and I love it. The comments I'm looking at, we've got like 60-something people in here, and I believe Newsday have reached out to us. I hope they're on. So if Newsday is on and they're listening to you, please print our voices in an authentic way, because you have something to say, and we want to hear it authentically. Right? So I'm going to turn it over to Lita, who is our project director at the Urban League for our State of Black Long Island. And she's going to give you some closing comments. Thank you, everyone.
Good evening, everyone. I want to thank you all again, as Teresa said, the panelists as well as the participants for taking a part in this conversation. When you think about that, this conversation is taking us to solutions. And so we definitely need to continue with this so that we come up with the solutions that will address the items that have been identified. If anyone wants to join the movement, please look at our Facebook page, State of Black Long Island, as well as reach out to us at info@urbanleaguelongisland.org if you're interested in being a part of the movement. And then lastly, we are going to kick off a survey that has been designed for the parents of K-12 students across Long Island. And a lot of the information that we've discussed as far as like some of the issues and concerns that the parents have, we have included that in our survey. So this survey is going to be released tomorrow, but I want to share it with everyone so you guys get first dibs. And even if, and I just put it into the chat, even if you don't have children in school at K-12, please share it with your networks, because as long as we can get information, then we can take it back to the powers that be to make sure that we take these conversations into solutions. Thank you, Jarvis, for moving forward with your vision. And like I said, please contact us if there's anything that we can do to support your initiatives.
Thank you, Alita. Thank you, Teresa, Aretha, for all the support and leadership that you have. I just want to thank our panelists, James Richardson, Dr. Tracy Adams, John Harrison, Glenn Stewart, Daphne Irizarry, Brandy Scott, Wayne White, who else we got? Lorraine Richardson, Craig, James Crawford, Krista. Thank you for. We didn't get a chance to get all to do questions, but we have the questions, and what we want to do is actually give those answers on the website. But definitely thank you to Nicole for reaching out to these superintendents, these board members. It's all about collaboration and allyship. And I think you brought just a lot of great people to the table. I see people starting to roll out. For those who are on Facebook Live, thank you so much. For those who are attending via Zoom, this was a great opportunity. I think we all had over 115 individuals that registered, but I know there's more people out there that are attending to my class. Thank you very much. So for those who, if you have additional things that we need to kind of talk about that we could, like I said, this is going to be shareable. So as panelists, if you have any like last words that you need to kind of share, please feel free to. I can chop it up. I got editing software on my computer. We can put this out in different chunks. So please, if you have any last words that you want to say or things that you definitely need to make sure this gets recorded, please share that right now.
And one of the things I just wanted to say, and it kind of echoes what Teresa had referenced earlier, was the importance of us really coming together and sticking together as a coalition, growing a coalition so that our voices can resonate to the powers that be to make sure that those resources that we very much need get to the places that we want them to go to. And so just encouraging us to continue to spread that word and to work and walk in lockstep and in unity, so that we can make the appreciable difference for all of Long Island.
Okay, thank you. That was wonderful.
Jarvis, I just want to say thank you for inviting me to be a part of the panel, a very esteemed panel, and some I've known for a long time.
Right on.
But I just want to say that we're not complainers. We are solution oriented.
Right on.
So if we have people out there listening to us, we have a collective think tank of people here who have ideas and suggestions, and we have solutions. We can do it all together. We can work toward the corrected ending of this part of the journey, but we are not complaining. We want to see results for all of our students. We are focused on our students of color, but we want to see all of our students across the entire Long Island to do better. But we are solution oriented, and I want to make sure that that is clear, that that's clarified, that we are not just sitting here sounding off, but that we really have collective information and energy towards correcting our course here on Long Island.
Message received.
Thank you, Jarvis.
Thank you again, Jarvis.
Thank you, Jarvis.
Thank you again.
I think we can all look forward to our part two.
Yes, thank you. It was wonderful.
Yes, it
All
was
right.
worth it. Thank you.
And we look forward to working with everyone again. Fantastic. And do send the survey directly to Libya, and we will send it out.
Jarvis, can I add one extra thing?
You go ahead.
I just wanted to add in there that with this, you said this is being recorded. For those, and I know they said there's also going to be a survey for some of our K-12 parents, but I think we need to encourage parents and let them know how powerful their voice is, because there's so much change that can happen when our parents step up and ask certain questions. And it doesn't necessarily have to be in any kind of way that will turn the deaf ear of some people, but ask the questions. Make sure you're out there, something doesn't sound right, or you feel like there should be more of a cultural spread amongst our teachers in our districts. You got to start asking questions. I mean, I'm a parent as well, and I'm an administrator and an educator, but we have to empower our parents to let them know that their word is so powerful, and they don't even realize how powerful it is.
It is.
So it's definitely to encourage them to attend board meetings, to attend PTA meetings, to attend organization meetings, their civic meetings. They have to put their word out there, and they have to make sure that they're being heard for the needs of their children.
Thank you, Sister Tracy.
And I just want, can I add on with what you said, Tracy? And not just go to these meetings when something happens. They need to go all of the time, on a regular basis.
a regular basis.
Yes, make their faces known and their names known.
I don't know if y'all realize it. Here's what I'm saying. There's still 41 people on here, so I'm like, they're still like waiting for y'all to like to kind of say some extra. I'm like, man, this is, but this is how important this conversation is.
This is the time for the dance and the juggling and the
No dance.
Sometimes I'm just like letting it free
It
talk.
sounds like we need some grassroots training for our parents.
Parents.
So
Yeah, definitely.
and I'm thinking back to the SNCC days. I'm thinking back to our revolutionary times during civil rights movement, that we need to galvanize our parents in order to know their voice, understand the power of their voice, harness their voice, and how to encapsulate that so that they are getting listeners on the other side of the table. Because sometimes they come up with so much energy, and I'm going to use that word, energy. They come up with so much energy about whatever the topic might be, that the actual what they're trying to say gets lost. Their message gets lost. Right. because of the energy surrounding whatever the topic might be. But to find that time for them to come in and have their voice when you don't have that much energy going on, that would be, the sustained voice would be amazing to see, not just around times like these, but the continuation of their list of demands and how those demands should be met, and the follow through of figure of how was this issue being addressed.
How can they execute it?
Yeah, I think the word strategic planning, strategic investing, I would say definitely we have to make sure that if we're going to have the ideas, we need to have the money behind it. So hopefully this is also an advocacy kind of conversation. I think you all have kind of brought it up in some of your conversations, but a plan without money is just talk. Right. So I think it's important that we send this message up to the state legislators, those in regents, boards, and people who have influence about like signing off on budgets and things like that. And we cannot shortchange or tip our future, which is our students, which are our parents, which are our communities. And I'm definitely making sure this is recorded and sent out, because as a person who deems himself as an educator and who's been in those trenches, we need those funding. And why are we not putting money in places where it's more precious? So, yeah.
May I say something, Jarvis?
Yep.
Just, on what you said, our children are the future of Long Island. 45% of our students are minorities. We are the future of this region. So I'm glad that, we are having this conversation. I hope that in the future we can continue. I know that Brandy and I, as sisters organizations, have collaborated for over 10 years. And I hope that coalition continues to keep stronger. But our brown and black, children need us and need us together and united. So we are the future of Long Island.
I think that we have to hold accountable the corporations that are here on Long Island, making money, selling products here on Long Island. They need to invest in our brown and black children, and children in general. They need to give money to districts to support programs. They need to give money and equipment to districts who don't have the resources. It's not fair for them to be here as corporations, reap the benefits of a very good bottom line, and we have school districts that do not have laptops for their children. That is not acceptable.
I just add one thing. Sorry, I don't want to go away without saying to Mr. White, thank you for that compliment earlier about being.
No, you're definitely, it's definitely needed.
It's there's very few of us at the elementary level. But it takes me back, and then it parallels to something someone said earlier. So Jarvis, you might have a little editing job. But in terms of being in the future, seeing your students progress, as I see them when they're 9, 10, and maybe I run across them, as she said, in the store or something to that effect. But a quick story, and I'm not bragging about what I do, it's about what my mom does. But my mom grew up in Alabama during the Civil Rights Movement. She met Dr. King more than once. She spoke at the church. She has tons of stories. So I used to bring her in. Well, she used to come in for 20 years of teaching. At some point when she's available, it doesn't have to be February, because not everything has to happen in February. Whenever she's available, she comes in the room, she sits, she talks to the kids, and she digs deep into her stories growing up and all the stuff she faced, the segregation, the school, and where she lived, she was on the line where it was just her and her brothers and sisters going to a school that was all white, you know, Ruby Bridges style, like exactly like that. So I heard these stories my whole life. So when I became a teacher, Mom, come in, because, you know, kids, Martin Luther King Jr., and then I obviously dig deeper, and I got people to dig deeper, but it's different when someone who experienced it is sitting in the room telling you the story. And so she would tell all the stories and everything, and she edited it a little bit because some of it, you know how violent it was. They are 9. The point of this is, you know, looking ahead, I see there was a Black Lives Matter rally locally in Riverhead, and 3 of my students from the class were sitting up front, and some of them I still talk to, and they email me, always let me know what they're doing, because at this point they're in their 20s, because I've been doing this for a long time. But they always remember the stories. They always remember that moment. And the 3 kids, ironically, the 3 kids who were in the picture were in the same class. All 3 are different colors, boys and girls, all shades, sitting there to this day. And they all remember the moment and remember the story. So going back to what I don't remember who said before, but said it, it does start young. You do start with them when they're elementary and getting across how people are different. I mean, I've been telling students for years, there's plenty of reasons. I say to 9-year-olds every year, and my own kids in the house, there's plenty of reasons not to like anybody. There's a ton of reasons. They're mean, they call you names, they do this, they bully you. It can't be what they look like. It can't be just color of their skin. It can't be because they're not wearing Jordans. It can't be because they're a Celtics fan, which kind of is a good reason to me, but I get why it's probably not. Any of that, no, legit, it's probably a problem, but I don't say that. The point is they have to know there has to be a good reason that can't be involved by how they look or their religion or anything like that. And you start young, and they, you know, they learn to care about everyone.
Tolerance, yes.
If people follow up in families, and in terms of, I'm sorry, I'm rambling. I just have one more thing. And then in terms of the parents, I tell my students again, I say to them, listen, if you have a problem, you need to figure it out. Someone knows the answer. I don't care what it is. If you can't figure out how to beat a level in a video game, chances are you've YouTubed it to watch a video of people playing the game, which is the dumbest thing I've ever heard of, but kids do it. So if you have a problem in math, you can find someone who knows the answer. You can problem this, you can't, as an adult, I can't fix half the things in this house, but I can find a way to figure it out. I teach that at a young age, and then when parents come in for, you know, conferences, I sit with them and say, listen, here's what's going on, blah, blah, blah. But if there's a problem with your kid as you go further down out of 4th grade and move up, find the answer. As she said earlier, make the phone call, call the district. What's going on, my student? I want to know this, I want to know that. Don't let anyone try to talk you out of your, well, you know, we're going to wait. No, let's figure this out. Don't wait. Don't sleep on your own kids. That's what I tell parents this all the time literally before they leave me, to not let anyone, because I mean, I work for the district, but it doesn't mean I'm going to sit here and just gloss over the fact that sometimes people will ignore your child. No, you not confront, but you talk to them and figure out what's going on if you have an issue, and don't wait on it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm sorry. I wasn't.
No, ain't no sorry. No.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to say something, and I know we are preaching to the choir right now, but I do want to say something to our white educators out there in terms of one thing they have to do is get to know their students. They should make that a priority first, their different students' background, because we all know that Long Island is extremely segregated, and we have teachers coming from all white areas to go teach students of color who really don't know what the lives are about these students of color in their classroom, or even the students who are impoverished. They do not know. So this is, I'm speaking to the white educators out there who are listening. We basically need you to be allies for our students of color. That is the key. And you got to get to know them first in order to know what makes them tick. And like I said, Long Island being so segregated, sometimes you can't, as a white educator, you cannot be scared of the students that you teach. Otherwise, you should not be in this profession. And one thing I would suggest is for you to somehow put yourself in areas that you may be uncomfortable, but you can learn more about your students and about your colleagues too, because many of you are in your own communities when you leave school, and therefore you need to put yourself in another community of color and without fear. Trust me, I haven't seen any white person hurt in any black and brown areas. So put yourself in there to learn a little bit more and be an ally for your students of color. They need you too, because the reality right now is 92% white educators on Long Island. And we want to change that, but with the 92% out there, you need to get to know your students of color.
It's not just the students, Wayne. They have to also get to know their colleagues of color. They have to also reach out to them and be supportive. They also have to create an environment where the person who's a teacher of color feels comfortable in coming to work, feels comfortable in meeting with students, because that seems to be a problem in many school districts. If you are the only person of color in a building, your colleagues are not receptive and they certainly are not supportive.
The only way I survived was because I had another teacher of color hired with me. Otherwise, it would have been very difficult for me to stay in that school.
I understand.
Honestly, I think that's the next part 2 of this question, of this conversation, the structural of people of color in these positions, not just in our classroom, but also in the board principal as well as the superintendent areas. I'm getting a side eye from my wife and some other folk. Let's call this a. We'll talk about this later. It's not going to be the end. So thank you all for being here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
It's been like a good reunion for me. So thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Good to see everybody.
Have a safe weekend, everyone. Be healthy. All right.
Yes.
Okay.
I'll share this video soon.
All right. Thank you, Jarvis.
Thank you. Good night.
All right. Thank you.
Be well, everyone.